And welcome to the SportsGrad podcast. My name is Ryan Walker, and with me, as always, is the 3-point specialist, Reuben Williams. How are you, mate?
G'day, Ryan. I'm doing terrific. Thank you very much. We like to base our podcast on things that are true, factually correct, and proper information. But nothing has been further from the truth that I am a 3-point specialist. I am horrific at basketball, but thank you anyway.
I won't. I'm not going to lie. When I've seen you play basketball, when we had we shot a few hoops once in lawn, and there was a few bricks being thrown. I must say, I think I came second in that comp.
Yeah,
maybe we should have reversed it, and you should have said I'm the 3-point specialist.
I think so.
Anyway, big episode today, by the way. I'm pretty excited for it.
Me too.
It's going to be a ripper, and someone who we've really admired getting to know in the last couple of months. So awesome. We'll get into it. If you want to learn more about who we are, feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn, or if you want to ask us any questions, jump into the SportsGrad community, which is just popping off at the moment.
Absolutely. And a shout out to all our community members. We appreciate every single one of you who is a part of that space and part of that community. And in particular, our guest Amanda Jenkins is a huge part of our community. And the Wins channel was going off the other week when everybody found out that Amanda had become the first ever female executive director at FIBA. And so to have her a part of our little contingent is absolutely massive and incredibly valuable for all the people in there who get the chance to learn from Amanda.
Absolutely. She's an absolute superstar, which is why we've got her on the pod.
That's right. Absolutely. So if you want to get your foot in the sports industry or hire people quickly or even just learn from the best in the world, such as Amanda, there really is something for everybody inside. So get involved with that.
Fantastic. Rose, we're going to start today's episode with a quick tip to get a job in sport for those listening. If you're currently studying or you've just finished studying, having a postgrad qualification in sports management on your resume can give you a huge leg up over the other potential candidates applying for the same role. If you want to pump up your resume and get specialised knowledge in sports behaviour, law, marketing, ethics, finance, governance and strategy, take a look at Deakin's postgrad qualifications. Their Master of Business in Sports Management is not one of, but the best one in Australia, ranked at number 1. So there's no reason not to check that out. So add a postgrad to your resume, and that's our tip for the episode.
And our good friends at Deakin are also the university behind Amanda's education. Amanda is a graduate of Deakin. We mentioned she's a newly appointed Executive Director of FIBA Oceania, aka she's the CEO, she's a head honcho, she's looking after basketball in Australia and the Pacific region. And she's the first ever female to do so on the executive team at FIBA, which is incredible. But Amanda has spent over 8 years at FIBA and has just been climbing the ranks from coordinator positions to manager positions to senior manager positions, all related to the realm of competitions and events. Along the way, she's also had these really cool opportunities to step into massive things like the 2018 Gold Coast Commonwealth Games, and get the chance to work as a basketball operations manager for 3 months there. And on top of that, she's also been given the opportunity to do an MBA at our good friends at Deakin University, having also finished her undergraduate there in 2013 doing sport management and exercise science, which is a great degree. I did it myself and had a lot of fun. So
only the best come out with that degree, I've heard.
So they say. So that is Amanda. One of the things that I absolutely loved about this episode was just how she progressed from getting a foot in the door into opportunity to becoming CEO. Like one place, one climb of a ladder, and she's gone from the very bottom to the very top. And she details at length exactly how she did it.
Yeah, I love that. I also loved how she spoke about the rotational program she did with FIBA in Switzerland for a month. And we know, how great HQ is in Switzerland. We've got Garth Town over there, Andrew Ryan. Only the very best go to HQ. So it was awesome to hear how that was just something she's got to do, which is unreal.
She really pushed for development opportunities and they really
Yeah.
supported her. And this is probably one of the best development opportunities you can get doing a rotation through Switzerland.
Yeah.
And then finally, it was just heartwarming to hear what it means to Amanda to be the first ever female on the FIBA executive team. So a lot to look forward to in this chat with Amanda.
Absolutely. We'll grab a pen and enjoy this chat with Amanda Jenkins. Amanda, welcome to the SportsGrad podcast.
Thanks, Ryan. I'm happy to be here. See you and Ruben.
Amanda, it's awesome to have someone such as yourself, and congratulations on the recent appointment as executive director and first ever female executive director too, which is absolutely outstanding. But also great just to have another Deakin person on the podcast as well. I know our good friends at Deakin would be stoked to know that you've reached the levels that you have had, and also just brilliant to connect with fellow alumni.
It is always good to see Deakin students doing well out in the world. It always makes me feel a little bit prouder when I see our people out there. That's for sure.
Yeah,
It's a family, Deakin, isn't it?
that's it. It's becoming one. We're trying to bring it closer together.
Yeah, we're bringing them all together. Ruben, speaks probably daily about his time at Deakin, so he won't stop talking about it. But it is that good, apparently. Is that a dog you've got there? What kind of dog do you
It
have?
is, and of course he starts as soon as we
Yeah.
start recording.
Perfect.
I've got a cavoodle, so
yeah.
they are the biggest guard dogs.
Yeah.
Like real ferocious. And as soon as anyone pats him, he's your best friend. So he's good at letting us know when we've got deliveries. That's for sure.
Yeah, they're pretty
Perfect.
tough when someone comes to the door, but then they kind of just turn into a bit of a baby at the end.
They are the worst. Honestly, he thinks he's a big dog, and then the biggest softie though ever.
Yeah, brilliant.
Amanda, when we chatted the other day, you mentioned to me that even though you've reached this incredible feat of being the first female executive director at a FIBA zone, when you first started 8 years ago, you thought you'd only be around for 18 months. So I was wondering if we could start with what changed during those years and why do you want this job now?
Yeah, it's a crazy reflection now, and to be honest, it's probably something that I've reflected on for the last couple of years as my role has grown. Uh, I think the main thing that changed, well, not necessarily anything changed, but I think the opportunities opened up. So, I was able to put in a bit of work and put in the effort, and I was then rewarded for that. So the good thing was that, when I first started, they were hiring a graduate. They wanted someone that they could mold into the person for the role. And then about 12 months into my journey, things changed within FIBA globally, with a change in governance structure, which meant that our office became part of one FIBA. We like to call it one FIBA, where we all came under the same umbrella. Uh, Previously, before that, was the global entity, and then us in this part of the world were FIBA Oceania, which was a separate entity, a separate body. Didn't have a huge connection globally. Really, it was just around the World Cups, senior and national and junior. But from a developmental perspective, it was very separate. So the governance changes took place in late 2014, early 2015. So not long after I had started, and actually, that opened up a huge opportunities for me and for the whole of Oceania, that we've been able to capitalize on. So I think that's been the main thing is opportunities. And then, you know, I've been extremely fortunate that I've had a boss that invested, and the organization invested in me as a person and in my development, and has given me a lot of opportunity. And probably just on the last real key one was the people. So when I first started, FIBA, I knew that FIBA was the global body and the FIBA World Cup and things like that. But working in Oceania is really about the people, and working for a global organization, you're pretty fortunate. You meet people from cultures, different places, personalities, and that's what I love the most is just the people and being able to connect and be with new people. It's not something that you get working anywhere else. There's people always say that the people are what makes your organization, but this is unique because every year I work with a new group of volunteers, a new organizing committee in a different country, and that's really what makes it all the better. So yeah, that's what it's all about.
Brilliant. That's great to learn. And what about in terms of growing the game of basketball in Oceania? Is that something that you've grown up absolutely loving, or has that been a love that's kind of developed during your time at FIBA? Why is that important to you now?
I I've always been a basketballer. I grew up around basketball courts. I've got older brothers and they both played, so I didn't have a lot of choice. Being a Victorian, it was footy, AFL, or basketball, and I went down the basketball route. Played, coached. I was heavily involved down in Victoria, and it's a big program down there. They do a lot of good stuff in Victoria, and basketball was always in my blood, but I probably never thought I'd work in basketball. It's one of those things like when you grow up with the sport, you then not. It's a bit of a mix. Do you want to work in it as well, or do you want to have that passion on the side? So
Mm,
when I first got into basketball, like into FIBA, I guess I knew about the events. I didn't really know the work they were doing at a grassroots level, and it tied in bits and pieces, in terms of my journey through university. I had a very heavy event portion and doing events and competitions. But then I was seeing grassroots sport as well. So I saw the impact sport could have um, on my life, on other people's lives. I'm a very much a big believer that sport makes people better, and playing a team sport. I love the team camaraderie and being part of a group. I would never make it as an individual player, as like a tennis player or a swimmer or something. That if I'm in my own head, that's no good. Hate running for that reason. But team sport, throw a ball in front of me. You're there for your mates and for your family basically. So I guess once I got into the FIBA world, I started to see the grassroots programs we were doing, and Basketball for Good was something I had never heard of before. And Basketball for Good was a brand new program that was started. The pilot was in 2014 in Fiji, so fresh new program when I first started, and it was about using sport for development. So rather than sports development, sport for development. And really, we look at it as a way of making better people, improving lives with sport as the vehicle and basketball in our case. And to me, that really resonated because I think that's what, it brings a lot of my passions together. I love helping people. I'm all about trying to make the livelihood of other people better. So that really resonated with me. And although it's not ever been my real responsibility, being part of that organization delivering that has I guess been one of the other reasons why I've stayed for so long as well.
I love it. Yeah, I can sense a real passion in your voice,
Mm.
which is actually, it's just awesome to hear. Um, how does it feel to be rewarded with the executive director role after 8 years at FIBA and to be the first ever female zone executive director as well?
Yeah, I don't know if it's a reward. Like, I think it's something that I've obviously been from other people's perspective. Yes, maybe it's a reward for the effort and the work I've done over a number of years. But it wasn't like I went into it thinking this is going to be who I
Yeah.
am. This is going to be my role.
Yeah.
Going back to Rube's question earlier, 8 years ago, if you had said to me in 2022, we're going to have a global pandemic, and then you'll be the first female on the executive, I'd laugh at you. That it was not something that I saw as that near on the horizon. As I obviously got more and more into working with FIBA, being part of the global family, seeing the impact we can have, major events versus grassroots basketball, I really then started to think, okay, I want to be part of this long term. I didn't expect it to be as Oceania exec, because I never had really any thought that David, who was in the role before me, would leave or would go. And a bit of context on that, I'm the fourth ever person to hold this role in the history of FIBA Oceania, in the history of Oceania basketball. There's only been three other people before me, and this is a 53-year,
Wow.
organization. So,
So we can expect
you
you
know,
to be executive director for at least 25 years.
Yeah.
well, that's the thing. David, he did 8 years. So why would I think that, when the two previous have done 25 and 20 or however, whatever the sway is, but that's something that I think is also, it's a great thing about FIBA, is that you're there for a long, you look after the family, you look after people within the FIBA family. And so the opportunity came about because of circumstances, and David's role changed. But I never would have thought that that was possible. And kind of for me, you know, David's a friend, he's a mentor, he was my boss, and he's over my journey really helped in that regard. And probably my intention was, yep, I want to one day be on the executive. In what capacity, I was still navigating my way, and really trying to work that out. But I'd be lying if I didn't have ambitions to be part of that executive. My whole life, I've been a bit of a leader. I've wanted to lead things. So when I got the job with FIBA, it was really about that opportunity, taking opportunities as they came, taking professional development options, not and making the most of them, not just taking it for granted and thinking that that was expected and I should be getting it. I've never once taken for granted any of the flexibility and the options that FIBA have given me. So yeah, in that regard, yeah, I guess it's a reward for effort. If I Yeah, I don't think it's gonna happen again, in the not saying that I'm gonna leave in 8 years or not gonna leave, like, that's who knows what happens in the future, but it's certainly something that, the legacy of the Oceania region is strong. The people before me, Al Ramsey unfortunately passed away late last year. He was the founding father of the region, and being able to meet him was such a huge honor a few years ago, because here's a guy that 53 years ago, we weren't having a conversation like this over a video call. He's getting on a boat, traveling
Yeah.
for weeks at a time around the region, and it's not the easiest region to get around even now.
Bit of a different
So
gig.
it was, and it was a different time. So, Al and then Steve Smith, was the next, and he was the first paid staff member for FIBA. And then David, took over from Steve, back in 2013, and really then professionalized the region, took it to just a different level, which is something that I'm hoping to continue on. But the work and the legacy of Al and Steve beforehand, and all the staff that have come through the region, that's really something I need to honor. And I understand that, and I'm looking forward to be able to do that.
That that adds a lot of weight and gravity to the position that you're in now, which is absolutely outstanding. And we're both, very honoured and excited to be chatting with you, Amanda. I think it's super, super cool and incredible what you've been able to be able to do. Um, can you give us a quick history in terms of how did you get to this point?
Yeah, no, that it. I'll try and be quick, but I also don't want to, like, knowing who the audience is for you guys as well, and talking to a grad. And you and we've all had a conversation just recently about the roles we have on market at the moment, and having just gone through a recruiting process, seeing how students are coming through at the moment. I think it's really key, when you do reflect on the journey I've had. Uh, One of the things I've really, the only reason I'm here today is because of that work that I did while I was at uni. And I did the double degree at Deakin of exercise science and sports management. And you asked me 8 years ago what I thought. If you asked me 10 years ago what I thought I'd be a physio working. My dream was
Yeah.
to be a physio working at the tennis with a tennis player. That was like the big dreams. Doing the double degree, I started to enjoy the business elements of sport, and getting a taste of what what that involves. Not that I had not had a taste. My brother worked for the YMCA and for Richmond, so I've had a good insight into working in sport for a long time. But when I got into university, fortunately, the double degree, whilst it's a lot of varying subjects, you can condense it into a couple of days of attending university. Everyone should go to university and attend classes, but I managed to make sure I still had 2 or 3 days where I could work. So I had 3 or 4 casual jobs going at once, and that was I go back to that journey because that's really set me up. I did school sport Victoria, running clinics, running programs, competitions. I joked with one of the mentors from school sport about how my days at the cross country carnival have really got me to where I am. The cold Melbourne winters, sitting on a deck chair watching the kids run cross country, really helped in my journey. But things like that, I worked for Melbourne Park also, while at uni. So all the events, major competitions, the victory games, the tennis. I saw it at an elite level from the venue perspective. And then also, I was working for a local gym, like on the front desk. I had an admin background as well. And at the same time, I was coaching basketball, playing footy.
Wow.
I had a lot going on,
Yeah, it
but
sounds like your
that
schedule is
really,
packed.
that really though set me up because now I look back and I was like, I'm not busy now. I'd had 3
Yeah.
jobs going that
Yeah.
day, and still studied. So it gives you a lot of skills, and that's something that I guess I'd stress to your audience, that take every opportunity, take every casual job, take every internship. I then did internships through the uni as well, and make sure it's varied. Unless you are set that you know what you want to do, and you want to be a marketer, or you want to be a comms person, or whatever it may be, make sure you get a taste of everything. No one expects, as a 18, 19, 20-year old, you've got it all sorted. Go
Yeah.
on a journey with all of that. So anyway, that's kind of the real background. I then got the job with FIBA as a sports admin. Really, really basic, entry level. They wanted a grad. I was a grad. It was great because you don't see that very often. But
Just on
it
that,
gave
when
me
you got that first job, having done the amount of work experience that you'd done, was that an incredibly relieving feeling to be able to trade it all in for one role?
uh, probably the opposite. I had a lot of anxiety about giving. Seriously, I didn't want to give up my Melbourne Park job, and I contemplated. I had to give up because I got to the point with Melbourne Park that I was on the regular rotation. So when you first start, you only get the open, and then once you've done a few years, you get into
Yeah.
the gigs. And I joke, I ushered at Usher. That was my gag for ages. But I, when I got the job with FIBA, I had to move to Canberra. So moving from Melbourne to Canberra meant I'd lost all of that I was comfortable with, and I had made it into my own. So I actually got to FIBA, and it was a bit of a, what am I doing? Because suddenly
Mm.
I'm just one job. It's all my focus. So I think I had just got to the point that I was on autopilot with all those other things, that that was my comfort, even though it was so uncomfortable. So when I got to FIBA, it did take a little bit of adjusting, to get into just, here's my job. Fortunate enough that, I think my second week, we were an office of 3 people at that stage. My second week, David and Annie, the development manager, flew to a World Congress, which meant I was in the office by myself. So thankfully, I knew Canberra. Like, I'd grown up going to Canberra a bit, so I was comfortable being in Canberra. But that
Yeah.
that one way to learn how to do a job is to be thrown in by yourself, and need to do activity. I wasn't completely by myself. There was another girl who stayed, and she was temping, in the role I was doing, so she did a good handover with me. But yeah, that was a welcome to FIBA. A lot of the time you'll be by yourself or on the road or doing things remotely. So it was a good intro. Um, it did take a bit to get used to it, and the journey then continued on throughout my time with FIBA, and I've kind of progressed through the elements and through the different roles. Took on more events rather than still had admin, but more event work. And it's funny, it's one of those, talking about anxiety of losing all those temp jobs. Even with my job with FIBA, you become very like, this is my role and this is what I do. And so as I got more responsibility, sometimes those other tasks would go to someone else. And it's
Yeah.
that adapting to no longer being in charge of something really ridiculous. I can't even remember now, but I joked with David about that, that I had to learn how to work with other people and how to
Yeah.
make sure that we as a team functioned. And that was really important in my development. I talk about opportunity a lot. I think jobs that provide you with opportunities mean that you want to stay. So, the man, I can never remember the actual quote, but it's that train people up so that they can leave, but that they choose to stay. And that
Yeah.
really resonates because that's how I view my journey. I was provided a lot of things that, I'm really, really fortunate. I did some study in Europe in my second or third year, working and met a lot of great people in London through that school, and that was through FIBA. I did a secondment to the Com Games when it was here on the coast, so that gave me a fresh perspective. Got me out of FIBA for a 3-month period, and working with new people. So there's been those certain, you know, forks in a road type of moments that have definitely helped keep me within the family. And I owe a lot to David as the mentor and the business as a whole, who enabled that for me to get to now where I am.
Unreal. Gee, it's quite the journey, isn't it? Yeah.
Mm.
As I
can't.
said, I wouldn't be short with that answer. I'm sorry,
No,
but I
no.
wanted to build it up because I think it's key that people remember that all those little things
Yeah,
count for something eventually.
Absolutely.
yeah. And that
Mm.
wasn't me saying it took forever. I was just saying it's
Oh,
quite a journey, and
It was an impressive journey.
your schedule when you're in Melbourne. Wow, there's a lot going on there. So no, it's awesome.
when you're a uni student, all you worry about is the money, the dollars. Like I
Oh,
would stand at the tennis
yeah,
counting how many hours I was on the gate thinking about it because I was
yeah,
like, okay, do I want a long shift tonight or do I
Yeah.
want this to be a 3-setter or a 5-setter?
yeah,
Like
Yeah.
yeah. Sometimes praying for it to be a 5-setter, just
yeah,
so you can get an
yeah.
extra few bucks. Um, let's come back to present day. So, how does your day change now that you've got this new role? Sort of what are you spending less time on, and what are you spending more of your time on?
Yeah, it's interesting, and my day today has been a bit of that mind-blowing moment because we've been hiring obviously for the sports admin, so it's, interviewing graduates at the moment, talking about the entry level role and the day-to-day activities of that. And then I presented for Basketball New Zealand at their board meeting. So you go from one extreme to the other when you think about world sport.
It's quite a spectrum.
And
Yeah.
yeah,
Hiring
it's
entry level
quite a
roles to international boards.
Yeah.
yeah. And then tonight I've got a management meeting with the global exec. So again, it's another extreme. So I guess the main difference, to be honest, the last 2 years I've been, I guess, transitioning into this role. In 2019 or 2020, I think it was officially, David took on the role as the executive director of the Men's World Cup. And at that stage, it was a joint role. So he was doing that and executive director of Oceania, which meant that he would need someone to step up and take more responsibility within our office. So my role slowly changed over the last 2 years. Pandemic obviously made things very different because before that, I really would have been organising our events, talking with local organising committees, uh, trying to check player eligibility, make sure teams are getting on flights and activities going to happen once we get there. And, it was a lot of
Yeah.
logistics. Then with this role, it was more stakeholder engagement. So it's more being making sure I've contacted certain people, on a regular basis, reporting to the board, assessing our strategic plan, and making sure we're meeting the strategic plan. So it's less about ops and more about strategy, and that's, I guess, strategy and stakeholders. That's now the key. Checking in with staff, that's something that's taken a while to learn and to understand, because you're now responsible not only for your own performance but the performance of your team. So, checking in, do they need anything from me? Do they need me to push down the line with someone else? It's a lot of those conversations. Um, at the moment, because we don't have the sports admin role, it's a little bit back on the admin. I think I did a Facebook post yesterday, so that was exciting. Logging in and
I,
doing that.
I was just going to ask, what task are you looking forward to most looking
Yeah.
forward to handing over?
We laughed because Annie and I, at the moment, we're probably both doing bits and pieces of the sports admin, and I think we both, things like the foreign player licenses and the finance, that they're not difficult. It's repetitive actions, and it's a good learning for working out FIBA, but it's not necessarily something that you want to spend your whole day doing. It's funny, the social media com stuff. When I first started with FIBA, it was 10% of my role, and we joked because we didn't have a comms person. And I'd go to these communications global meetings and I'd be like, look, my 10% of my role, I've done a social media post. I wrote one article, that was great. And then FIBA evolved, like our office evolved, and we brought in a comms person full time. So I actually quite enjoyed going back to that, the early days of having to write some articles and things. In saying that, I'm very happy to get the comms person back on so that we can
Yeah.
no longer have to worry about that.
Yeah.
I'm sure our good friend Andrew Ryan, director of FIBA Media, would be happy to hear that resources being poured into communications.
He is, yeah, and Andrew and I, we've got a good relationship, and after he'd been on your podcast, I was like, oh, I was very interested in hearing about what you do and understanding what's going on over there. But it is something that, where it's probably that day-to-day task that, I think it's time for someone a bit younger and a bit more tech savvy to come on board and show me some things. It'll be good to see whoever the new person is, what they bring to the role and make their own.
Well, speaking of learning and development, were there any particular opportunities or courses that stand out in your mind when you look back as ones that were pivotal to your development?
Yeah, I probably mentioned it a bit earlier, just in terms of those moments where the fork in the road. You know, I had reached a point in my career and my development where if things stayed the same, maybe I would be getting a little bit bored and a little bit stagnant. And that's where credit, again, back to David. I don't want to talk too much about him, and he'll
David
he'll get, a big head.
David sounds like the king of FIBA.
Oh no, don't let him hear you say that. But but I think that's a credit to him as a boss. Like, he knew when to provide opportunity for someone, and I hope that's what I can now do for future staff. And that was, there's probably a couple of moments. The course in London was amazing because FIBA globally. It was not long after we went through the transition of one FIBA, so it meant that little old me from the Australian Oceania office went and spent a month working out of HQ. And I spent a week with different departments. So it was almost like a job rotation
Oh yeah.
for me within HQ. And I think
Is HQ
I'm a
in
massive
Switzerland?
relationship. Yeah, in Switzerland. Sorry, yeah, our headquarters is based in Switzerland. So that was a moment where I'm a big relationships person and a big believer in building relationships with people. And yes, technology makes it easier to do that now, but nothing beats some face to face time with people to get to know them and then understand how they operate and how they work. And so that was a really pivotal time for me because I understood a lot of the people who had been with FIBA for a long time, some of the fresh new faces coming through who were, my age. and I built some really strong connections and relationships during that time. So the course was great. It was, the theoretical knowledge that helped, and that was a postgrad sports management opportunity. But then the relationship building during that visit with the headquarters was pretty pivotal. And then I would say the Com Games secondment was was a big step in my career as well, because probably 12 months earlier, or a little 18 months, whatever it would have been, I had an opportunity to do something with the Olympic Committee, the Australian Olympic Committee, and I ended up turning it down because it just wouldn't quite fit with FIBA and FIBA's schedule. But I've always had that inkling about wanting to work in a multi-sport event, and the Olympics is obviously that pinnacle. And when the Com Games came about on the Gold Coast, our office had done a lot with the sports manager, Narelle Kelly, and she was, fantastic managing the basketball elements. And then the chance came for me to go and spend 3 months in her team as I guess the technical person for the sport, and that was just another opportunity to work for. I was still in basketball, but a new opportunity to work in a big organization, because Com Games, there's hundreds, thousands of
Yeah.
staff. And suddenly I went from organizing an event by myself with volunteers to being tiny, minute part of a massive event. And that was big for me to understand the ecosystem of world sport. And the Com Games isn't, in the FIBA context, basketball's only been in the Com Games twice when Australia is hosted. So it's not a huge one in terms of FIBA's schedule, but them allowing me to go and do that 3 month um, secondment was big again for me to understand world sport, and just to be with new people, and that opportunity. So there's been other opportunities, plenty of internal trainings as well, where we're big on leading projects. So having the chance to do something from start to finish, I could
Yeah.
go on for ages. Like, there's been a lot of things, but they're probably the two moments that stood out in terms of things that FIBA made happen for me, that helped me in my career. That's for sure.
I know we've spoken about David. I won't say, well, I will say the king of FIBA. But did you have any mentors along the journey? It might be David, might not. But what's one piece of advice from them that you wish you knew when you first started?
Oh, yeah. I don't want to say David again, but
You
he
can.
obviously has
You
been.
can. It's
He's
totally
one
fine.
of the things he always drove into me was just about. It's not always about being right, but it's about making sure that you get the outcomes that are needed. When I probably came into the workforce, it was all about. I put a lot of pressure on myself about if I did something wrong, and he really emphasized that point. It's not about right or wrong. There'll be times where what you think is right isn't necessarily the outcome that we go for, but that doesn't mean it's wrong either. So it's understanding that you work for a company, you work for a business, and you're all working towards that one common goal. And how you get to the journey, and working with national federations, how you get there. There's no right or wrong path to that point, but getting to the end point is pretty key. The other one, and it's not necessarily mentors, but different people who I've lent on throughout the journey, and opportunities, and it's people from within FIBA. Some colleagues from Europe, or from colleagues from Asia, or colleagues from around the world, and just their bits and pieces about events and about how they work in different parts of the world. I think those little moments were key, and it comes back to those experiences. You only learn from experiences. So yeah, mentors, I guess, David's one. The girl who was doing the temp role when I first started, Courtney, she has now become a mentor slash colleague, throughout the journey. She's done a lot of work in events, and she's over in New Zealand working on the Rugby World Cup now, I think. So she's someone that also I'll tend to message and see, like, how have you done this? Have you had to do this? Like, what have you done? So it's just building those relationships, I guess, and not being afraid, afraid to ask questions is probably another one that I've learned along the way. That sometimes you might get managers and people that don't like when people ask too many questions. But to me, that shows that you want to learn and you want to understand. Um, the young girl who was in a sports admin role, who that's now vacant, she's taken up an opportunity with our headquarters in Switzerland because of what she's done over the last 2 years working in our office. And she's massive on asking questions and trying to understand the why. Why do we do what we do? Not just doing it for the sake of ticking it off the list. Have a bit of, like, a bit of trying to understand the behind the scenes of what's going on.
Mm.
That again is probably something I've learned, and not necessarily from a mentor, but I sat in on a professional basketball New Zealand was doing a high performance workshop, and the presenter there worked for the New Zealand Olympic Committee, and she presented one of those, what is your why sessions, and that has stayed with me ever since. And that was by chance that I just walked past while New Zealand were hosting an event,
Yep.
and I was able to go in and sit in the room while this high performance workshop was going on. So don't discredit a lot of those discussions and offhand things that happen during your journey.
It's probably the question around understanding the why is a good one for people out there who's probably, you might be making your first steps in a new job, right? And actually understanding what's underneath the actual things you have to do is probably the best questions you can be asking your manager. Like,
Yeah,
you've got to do this because it's in the strategy. It was like, but why? Why have we got that in the strategy?
yeah,
Actually understanding
yeah.
that'll help you understand the ecosystem, like you mentioned before. So there's a question for the young players at home.
And
It is, and it's a difficult one because you also don't want to look like you're questioning your
Yeah,
superiors of, well, why am I doing this? It's not about that, and that's the difficulty that as a young employee coming into the industry, I completely get why someone might come in and be afraid to ask questions, but actually, if you ask questions and then I if you repeatedly ask the same question, there's an issue.
yeah,
If you ask the question and then it helps you develop and get somewhere, that is a really powerful sign to me about someone who's going to be worth investing in and worth pushing forward in our business. And if a business doesn't know why they do things, that's something that maybe as a young employee coming through, you can help shape that.
yeah.
Be the cultural change that maybe a company needs. Definitely.
it sounds like through all the development and different opportunities that you were given, a lot of it was related to helping you like make things happen. Like the nature of your role is just making a lot of things happen at a very high level with a lot of people from a lot of different places. And along the way, you've been able to pick up different things that have helped you figure out, all right, what's the right thing to make happen? What sort of outcome do we want from making that happen? How do I do that myself? How do I get other people to help make that happen as well? And I guess like underneath all that, I kind of like these fundamental skills of, right, I need to be able to communicate effectively so that I can bring in people from other countries to do what I do. I need to be able to learn project management so I can keep this tournament on task and to budget. Um, and it sounds like you've been able to. I'm not sure if you've done these things in isolation through any of your time, but it sounds like at a fundamental level, these are some of the things you've been able to pick up from other people on your journey.
Yeah, and project management is an interesting one because event management is obviously it's just another form of project management. And I had been in the role for a few years, and every year we look at, okay, what PD opportunities do you have in the next 12 months? What would be suitable? And so I did a project management course. And at the time, you're sitting in a room with people working in the oil fields or for a trucking company or for the mines. Like, it was not a sports audience at all. But then actually okay, I can learn from these people. They're running multi-million-dollar industries, and this person needs to learn the skills to make sure all these bits and pieces are in place. So again, going back to opportunities, you need to make the most of the opportunities and absorb them. I don't mean absorb a textbook, you know, definition, but absorb what is relevant to what you do and how you do it. The reality is you're going to make mistakes. Like you're going to learn more from the mistakes you make through the journey than anything else. And for me, that was probably one of the key lessons was that it's okay. No one expected. In 2014, we went to Fiji for my first ever FIBA event. I was fresh. I'd been in the role for 8 months or whatever it was, and suddenly I'm trying to run a competition. But I was given the opportunity, given the faith of our business that I could manage it. There was stuff that didn't go right. There were things that we could do better. And 2 years later, we went back to Fiji, and the event was awesome. Like there were still things that didn't happen and didn't work, but the lessons and learnings I'd had from 2 years earlier, and the LOC, the local organizing committee, had, it was like a different event almost, but we're in the same venue, we're in the same circumstances with a lot of the same volunteers and same people, but you learn and you adapt. And 2015 was the same. I remember in 2015 I came off a youth event and then into a senior. Under the old system, Australia would play New Zealand every 2 years to qualify for Worlds or for the Olympics. And so this must have been 20 the Olympic qualifier in New Zealand, and we'd just come off the youth event. I was exhausted, and this was when I had the 10% comms role, and my 10% just built up to that point that I was exhausted and I didn't do it correctly, and I was getting pressure from headquarters, and it was just that moment of sometimes having a cry or having releasing the emotions. I was then able to regather myself and fix whatever had happened. But the reality was no one expected me to be perfect. And I think that was one of the big things and lessons from FIBA was just learning and not making the same mistake. Learn from it, fix it, and then now you know what to do better. And that's a massive thing that I've done with Rach over the last 2 years. Rach is the one that's gone now to Switzerland. Uh, but for her, I was always like, I don't expect you to be perfect. I just expect that you put the work in. And that's something that I think was resonating with me through my journey as well. But yeah, there's certainly PD opportunities that tie in, so the project management, but there's also on the job learning. And if it's a mistake, you learn from it and you move on, or it's a way of the self reflection. I've got an okay level of EQ, in terms of my emotional intelligence and understanding what's going on in my own behavior, but also having someone that you trust enough to tell you and to take the feedback on is key as well. So, yeah, a few different elements, I
Mm,
guess, of to
yeah.
help in the journey. That's for sure.
I'd say you're probably playing that last point down as well.
Well, I'm trying to sound like modest,
Yeah.
it's also about understanding your emotions and how that then impacts on other people.
Mm,
Like we forget how much is reflected through body language and through a smile and um, you know our world. We're working with volunteers. We're not working with paid people. So if I come in and I'm having a bad day and my attitude is bad, it's going to impact on the whole event. And so I can't afford to be low. You can't be an energy sapper, we say.
Yeah.
mm,
You need to be an energy giver. And that's especially true in events. Anyone out there looking to get into an events work, it's hard work. Like
Mm.
it's really tiring. But the thrill of it happening is amazing. And that's what
Yeah.
you work for. So you just get to that point, the ball gets thrown up and we're underway. That's what I gets me excited about my role and my journey. And that's, I think, one of the key pieces of things I've learned is about how to be an energy giver. I'm still learning. I'm always still learning, that's for sure.
Mm.
There's times where I just don't want to, but I know I have to. So that's the daily struggle that you now have, for sure.
Speaking of energy giving, there's a huge FIBA Basketball World Cup coming up in Australia, which is massively exciting for us. Uh, can you speak through what your role is in organising the tournament?
Yeah, it's really exciting, and we now know the 12 teams coming to Australia after the qualifiers just finished last week. So it's getting real now. We
Yeah.
have the draw on the 3rd of March, so we're going to know exactly who's playing who in each pool. My role, funny question, because I probably wasn't expecting to have the ED, the executive director, title
Mm.
or the before the World Cup. So my I guess s- in some elements I'll be on a more political governance level,
Yeah.
working with our stakeholders on the event. But I also think I'll still have an ops role, maybe managing one of the venues, working with our competitions department, because that's traditionally been where I've been, is in our sport and competitions department. The World Cup in China, I managed one of the venue. We had 8 cities, so myself and colleague from FIBA Europe, we managed one of the cities. So I've had experience being a venue manager, and that was last year. I went to Latvia and worked in Latvia on the Youth World Cup, and again
Wow.
managed the venue there. So originally the plan was I would manage one of the facilities, and I think I still will do that, and that's my intention, is to still work with that. And that when we say that, it's working with the LOC counterpart, the local organising committee, and working with them on how to make sure the event runs, liaising with teams, making sure the buses are coming and all our staff are fed and volunteers are in place, general event,
Yeah.
you know, things. We meet monthly with the organising committee in Australia. A lot of my role is, I guess, being that go between, because you've got everyone in Europe working on their projects and activities, and then the local organisers in Australia, who are a separate uh, company, like separate from Basketball Australia. They're a separate entity running the competition. So their role is to put all of the event on. And I guess mine, I've kind of been a bit of a liaison in some circumstances, venue inspections, things like that. So I still, it's really exciting. I am very much looking forward to seeing the event and seeing the world's best female basketballers on our shores, because I think watching some of the games lately, I've been very fortunate to see the Japanese and the Chinese team in person a number of times over the last couple of years, and their basketball is elite. Like, it's not, men's and women's basketball is very different in speed and what you're looking for. The Japanese, the style of play, it's just, it brings a smile. Like, it's pretty
Yeah.
cool. And then to see someone like Diana Taurasi, one of the greatest to ever play, with the Team USA, and I'm, I believe she's planning on still playing, and that would be, fantastic to see her in Australia and live. And of course the Opals, the Opals have been a world leader in women's basketball for so many years. So to see them, and inspire the next generation in this region, because there's plenty of people within the Oceania region who look up to that Australian Opals team. So it's really exciting. I encourage everyone to get to Sydney, and I think tickets will go on sale in late March. So everyone should definitely keep an eye out on that. If you're not already following all of the socials, follow all the socials.
Which Amanda is lovingly posting
Yeah.
at the moment.
You're leading them, aren't
Yeah,
you?
not those ones, but I will share those ones too.
Yeah.
We
Um,
get someone with a lot more skill and know-how in
Oh,
developing those.
I was thinking, great. Amanda's running the socials this year. Beauty. So,
that sounds outstanding. It must be super exciting for you to like get your hands back into the weeds of what you love doing, putting on international events. Because whilst being executive director is an awesome role and exciting, you kind of sit above everything. So I'd imagine you'd have a nice time getting your hands dirty again in this tournament.
Yeah, and I think the beauty of Oceania, and this is something that maybe my regional colleagues don't from the rest of the world don't necessarily get. But because we're a small team, there'll be 5 of us based on the Gold Coast, and we service 22 national federations. So it there's no chance to just sit back and not get your hands dirty. Projects are always happening, and that's what I love. You don't want to. I'm a people person. I like to interact and meet people and stakeholders and bring people along for the journey. But at the same time, being able to run an event, or uh, we're in the middle of a women in leadership program called We Lead, and that's something that I'm hugely passionate about, is how do we bring up the next group of female leaders in the region. So I'm excited to see, how that progresses. And that's something that Annie is leading from our office at the moment, and we'll see that come to fruition over the next few months. So there's definitely projects like that I'll still have bits and pieces in. The events, obviously, this year, along with the Women's World Cup, we have in our calendar 4 other events for this year, which is huge for Oceania. That it doesn't happen, along with the Men's World Cup qualifiers that are ongoing. So there's always activity, lots of different countries to be working with, getting events to happen. So the sports admin role is going to be super busy, thrown straight
Yeah.
into the deep end. But at the same time, like I'll definitely play a helping hand in a lot of that, because that's been my, I guess, bread and butter for the last 8 years. And we want this person, the new person, to succeed in the role. We're definitely not going to let them, flail around and not succeed. We want all of this to happen. It's been a long 2 years of COVID, and
Yeah.
particularly in this region, like a lot of the Pacific, they're still battling lockdowns and restrictions. I haven't been to New Zealand in years because of the travel restrictions, and they're normally, our closest neighbour that we would go and interact with. So it's something that I think there's a lot of excitement about what this year brings for events, and to be able to bring the FIBA family back together is what I'm, excited by. Haven't even seen my president Burton flew into Sydney during one of those brief New Zealand border openings. Burton Shipley, he lives in New Zealand, so that was I spent an hour with him. So I've seen my president for 1 hour in the last 2 years. So it's tough work, and
Yeah.
sport's not alone. Everyone's gone through it, but it's something that I think the next 12 months, Women's World Cup, we've got Pacific Games next year, which is like a mini Olympics, Men's World Cup. Like there is a lot going on, and that's what makes me excited. That's for sure.
Fantastic. Amanda, you spoke about inspiring the next generation with the elite basketballers coming to Australia. You are doing exactly the same, being the first female executive director for FIBA, one of the zones. I want to throw you into a hypothetical situation. If you could go back in time to Deakin University and just drop a note on the desk or inside a textbook that your younger self might come across at some point in time, what would you write on that note?
I did spend a lot of time in that Alga Road campus, across all those different buildings, and then in the library. It was a lot of time, and because I didn't live near Deakin, I had to make the most of being at Deakin. So that library, every level, and I'm sure it's different now, but I
Great
think I've
campus.
got my spot. I
Mm,
know where I'm putting my book and my
yep.
note. In terms of what I'm putting on the note, look, I would probably say, and it's reflective of the whole conversation, is just about making the most of opportunities. Don't not everything is going to be for you, but you will learn more from the ones that you know you never want to do again. As bad as it might sound, or you'll go and do something and you may not have the best experience, but learn from that experience, learn from that opportunity, because it will help shape where you want to go. It's really hard in sport to get in where you want to be. And fresh off these interviews, one of the big things about when you're interviewing or when you're going for a company is know about that company. It doesn't matter that you've probably spent hours applying, and you could have the best well-written resume, but for sure they're going to ask you, what do you know about us? And if you can't answer the question, or the only thing you know is what's in the job description, it's hard to overlook that, because companies want to invest in you, but you have to invest in a company. So make the most of opportunities, and then research and know who it is that you're going to apply for, because the opportunities come, but only if you then get your foot in the door. So it's a bit of a two-pronged advice I would give.
That's brilliant. Yeah, you're right. You absolutely do learn just as much from the opportunities that you never want to do again as much as the ones that you absolutely
And I can
love.
guarantee you, when I have kids, my partner is going to do the cross-country carnivals, because I've done my time in the cold.
Well, you're on the Gold Coast now. That'll be nice and warm up there, I would have thought.
Oh,
No complaints about the
not
weather.
with the rain and things that we get. So I'll do the indoor sports. He can do the outdoor sports.
I'm sure a deal can be struck there. You've done the hard yards, Amanda, so you've earned it. All right, well, we might wrap it there, but honestly, Amanda, all we can say is thank you for coming in and having a chat to us. Just hearing all of your experience, across the board, and your journey to get you where you are today is really inspiring for people coming through. And it's so awesome to have you as part of the SportsGrad community as well. I've seen you nice and active in there. You're in job fair the other day. So it's just what's coming through to us is just your passion for what you do and how you're able to sort of teach the next generation coming through. It has been really awesome to see in the conversations that we've had. So thank you so much, and good luck for warming the seat for the next 10 years. I think you've got in the hot seat. So good luck.
Oh yeah, I know. Let's maybe once we get to the 75 year anniversary, I hope that there's maybe a few more that will join us at the table. But in all seriousness, I think what you guys are doing is great as well. So if there are people out there that want advice, or find me on LinkedIn, and send me a message, because I'm always happy to share, and to provide feedback or advice. What's been really impressive is the number of applicants we received, and the quality. It's making it really hard to nail it down, but that's what you'd rather. So credit to you guys for making the most of these opportunities, and good luck to everyone out there, that's for sure.
Awesome. Thanks, Amanda.
Thank you.
Alrighty, Rubes. Well, what an episode. We love Amanda. So much knowledge and just so much stuff that people can take away from that to apply to their own careers, whether you're starting out right now or you've been in the game for a while. There's so much you can learn from Amanda. So what did you love?
And just so easy to get along with, like incredible operator, but just genuinely nice human being too, which is always important.
Totally.
First thing I'm taking away from listening to Amanda is how important it is to find an organisation willing to invest in you. She's very good at taking the opportunities, but she had to have an organisation that was willing to support her. And I think that sort of lens on your career can be critical when it comes to being in an interview and the type of questions you want to ask of them, or even filtering your job search or the people you talk to as well. And even just, challenging your organisation as well to do more, because you can see clearly when organisations are prepared to invest in people, you end up with people like Amanda.
Yeah, absolutely. I loved what she said around finding opportunities in the sports industry, even if it's not your end goal or your dream job. Let's be honest, you can't start your career in your dream job. Very, very hard to do. So her point around is finding things out there that you can go and have a go at. Then you can put a line through it if you don't like it, but you're growing from that experience. So it's a bit of a tip out there for people. If you want to work in cricket or you want to work in tennis, find whatever role you can in there that you're somewhat interested in, because that's how you're going to learn and that's how you're going to progress. So don't be afraid to have a go.
Well, I had a very similar experience to Amanda, because I did the double degree. I thought I was going to end up in the science side of sport when I first started. And I did an internship in strength and conditioning. And at the start, I kind of liked it, but then as it went on and on and on, I was like, you know what? I'm not actually really enjoying this internship too much.
Yeah.
I still find all that stuff incredibly important and try and keep up with it all, but I just found that I was more swayed towards the sport management side of things. I found that more fascinating, and that ended up with me doing a complete backflip from how I felt at the start of that degree. So that was a good way to just test things and know I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
Awesome. Finally, what I'm taking away from Amanda as well is be the energy giver.
I love
when
it.
you're at events, even when you're anywhere, don't be the energy sapper. You've got to be the energy giver. Particularly, as Amanda said, if you're working with volunteers who are motivated by their own intrinsic reasons to be there at the event, you've got to give them a reason to stick around and come back again. And that can be applied in so many other situations, but you've got to be the one who's carrying the energy. As Amanda says, she can't afford to not be on every single day. So
the barometer.
Be the barometer, be the vibe check, be the energy giver. That is our last lesson from Amanda Jenkins.
Awesome. I love that episode. It's absolute cracker. So we hope you did as well. Find us on LinkedIn, plus be sure to jump into the SportsGrad community. We'd love to chat with you on there. Head to the SportsGrad website to join, or head to our link in our show notes as well. Thanks for listening. We will see you next time.